Hello guys. Right, I just wanted to check that I was in the right place, and I am. So, good afternoon. This is Charli Wall here. Welcome back to my question of the week. I was away last week, so you had a week off from me, and I had an amazing week on the Norfolk Broads. It was incredible. If you ever get the chance to go, I would highly recommend it. So this week I've been inspired to come on and talk about grief, trauma, and addictions. And there's a few reasons for this. This isn't exactly a question. I haven't received a question, but there have been several people in my community, in my field, in my arena, who have experienced grief recently. And I was having a conversation with a rather wonderful woman this week about her experience of grief and her experience with addictions and her experience with guilt and shame. And this seems to be something that comes up quite a lot for people. And so I just wanted to come on here. Nothing's planned. I'm just going to see what comes through, and just to talk to you about grief and addictions and trauma, and how we are always doing the best that we can see to do, always. And grief is exhausting. Grief is painful. It's unpleasant. It's difficult. It's challenging. It's emotionally draining. And it doesn't matter whether, you've lost someone suddenly, or you have lost somebody that you know is going to die. Irrespective of any of the detail around it, grief is a unique experience to the person going through it, which means there can also be familial problems in relationships once you've gone through the grief. So there's lots of potentially managing that goes on. And this might be, not only the loss of a person, it might be the loss of a relationship, it might be the loss of a pet, it might be the loss of a house, it might be the loss of a job. I know that coronavirus brought about its own loss of many things that people were used to. And so my own experience of grief, for those of you that have known me for a long time or followed me for a long time, is complex. And the reason I wanted to do this talk, if you like, is because I understand it very, very deeply. And I've had different experiences of grief, and I'll try and list them, but I might forget some. Or my first experience was losing my granddad when I was 7, and then I lost my brother when I was 21, and the father that I knew in the same accident at 21. Although he survived, he was severely disabled, so he changed mentally and physically. More grandparents, then I lost a baby. Then later on I lost, I didn't lose, but when I lost my dad in 2016, I then chose to sell my house. So in theory, I lost my house, I lost my business, although I sold my business. But in the frame of mind that I was in, I would have told you I've lost my dad, my son's left home, I've lost my house, I've lost my business, I lost the 2 cats that I had. So my language was around loss. That's what I would have told you. But the truth is, when my dad died, I chose to sell my business. I chose to sell my house so that I could try and change my life. So that's my own experience around loss. Now, when my brother first died, what I did personally was I chose to look after my father. And although I didn't really feel like I had a choice at the time, it was the choice that I made. But what happened to me was I started to get into addictive behavior. So I think sometimes I don't like using the word addictions because it can feel like too strong a word, but I was certainly creating habits of behavior for myself that that weren't healthy for me. And that included, drugs, and not so much alcohol at that point, but, risky behaviors that are associated with drug taking. But all the while I was doing that, I was still going backwards and forwards at this time to look after my dad. I was doing a nursing qualification. And so to all intents and purposes, I was still completing my life, if you like. I was still looking on the outside that like I was moving through my life, but all the while I was suppressing the grief and the pain. And that's one of the things I wanted to talk about, because often what I did and what I see people doing is they either drink or they numb out in some way. So the grief I kept at bay, which would periodically sort of pop out or fly out in rage, or chronic sadness. And also I had chronic anxiety and PTSD as a result of what happened with my brother and my father's accident. Now, I didn't know I had anxiety. So as well, what I was doing was kind of managing my symptoms through smoking and working really hard, working all the time, being a workaholic, and doing these things at the weekend. But when I was doing that, and that didn't last particularly long, it maybe lasted until 1993, 94, 97, I moved to Cambridge so that I could be nearer my father, who was suffering with his own chronic physical and mental health problems. I was doing the best that I could see to do. I was doing the best that I could see to do. Now, we didn't have social media around in those days, so the support for bereaved siblings and carers of parents wasn't as it is now. So it's a brilliant thing that there's that support and community and people talking about it. But still, under the radar, I think there's a lot of people dealing with a lot of stuff on their own and feeling shame around the things that they potentially have done. And one of the things in particular that struck me around a conversation that I had recently was somebody had shared that they had almost begged their loved one to give up. I don't know if that's the right word, and there was a lot of shame around that for this person, and a lot of guilt and a lot of emotion, and it was raw and it was difficult. And why I wanted to make this particular vlog is because I want you to know, anyone who's listening, that we all have thoughts. We all have thoughts that come into our mind. And some of them we take notice of and some of them we don't. Now, when my own father was dying, for the final week, 2 weeks, he was in hospital for the final time for 5 weeks. It was very traumatic. It was very difficult. It wasn't peaceful. It was none of the things that the platitudes that people say. It was none of those things. And in that final couple of weeks, I was literally begging him to let go. And I suffered for a long time after he died because I berated myself and I had shame around having those thoughts, and I suffered as a result of experiencing absolute chronic anxiety and guilt around having the thought that I wanted him to let go, because I was tired. I was really tired of looking after him, and I was really tired of seeing him in pain. Now, the reason I'm telling you this story is because at that point in my life, I started drinking again, and I didn't cope very well, hence why I made what I now consider to be not great decisions, not great life decisions, selling everything that I owned to get as far away as possible as I could from where I was living at the time, but also because I was really consumed by this guilt and this trauma and these memories and the PTSD that had come back. What I understand about that now through the learning that I've done over the last few years is that we all have thoughts, and those thoughts only have meaning if we give them meaning. And when we're dealing with imminent death, we're going to have any number of thoughts, and then if we go into judgment, those thoughts are neutral. They don't actually mean anything. They're neutral, and they come in and they go out. The only power that they have is the power that we give them ourselves. We're the meaning-making machine. We're the ones experiencing the thinking. And if we don't know that, when we go into guilt and shame in our own mind, again, with our thinking, we are the ones that suffer, and then we are the ones that can't deal with that, and then we are the ones that hide that, and then we are the ones that potentially have a habit of behavior. And the only reason we do what we do is to settle down, or to get out of the grief, or to get out of the pain, and to get out of the shame, because there is a numbing that happens. Now, it doesn't matter to me what you do. Like, I deal with all habits of behavior, whether it be drinking, drug taking, eating, not eating, hoarding, shopping, spending money, smoking. Face picking is one I used to do. It doesn't matter to me the thing. What matters to me is that you have judgment over that, and it doesn't mean anything about you. It doesn't say anything about you. All it says to me is that there's even wisdom in that, because when you're doing the habit, there's some sort of disconnection, there's some sort of micromanagement of your grief. But what I've learned over my years of doing this work, doing the inner work, working with hundreds of people, and all of my years working in addictions, is that we have to go through and feel the grief, whether you're screaming, whether you're hitting a cushion, whether you're gnawing your teeth, whether you're, whacking a punch bag. Like, feel it as it comes up, because it's always going to move through you. It's always going to move through you. And the only way I can kind of explain that is if I say to you, when you watch a sad movie, or for men, if any men are watching this, when you're watching an action movie, either a sad film or a loving film, or a film that you're really drawn into, right? Something that you're really compelled by, you're there with them. You're there with the characters. You might jump if someone makes you jump in a scary movie. You might cry if you're watching a movie that makes you cry. Have you ever seen Marley and Me? Oh my God, I wept. I wept at that film when the dog died. Because in that moment, my experience was in that movie with those characters, because I'm experiencing it through my thought. And then it passed. Now, the thing about grief and experiencing certainly traumatic grief, as I did, is that what kept me in that loop was doing my various habits of behavior because I wanted to escape the pain. I didn't want to feel anything that was uncomfortable for me. And so I spent years literally and metaphorically running from anything that might create that feeling that I was frightened of. I was frightened that I wouldn't stop crying if I allowed myself to cry. I was frightened of going under. I was frightened of having a breakdown. I was all these things I'd made up that kept me from actually sort of feeling it. And of course, when my father did eventually die, it kind of reignited it all. And so, luckily or not luckily, I was able to go through it all after a period, after quite a long period of being, of isolating myself and suffering with quite acute anxiety. But luckily, I'm so lucky that I came across this understanding which transformed my life. And so now I realize that even when I feel those pangs of grief or those waves of grief, I'm okay. I'm okay. Now, if you're someone at the moment who is, experiencing these things, and you might be, drinking or eating or smoking or doing things which you have guilt and shame about, or maybe they're secret things that you do, I want you to know that you're not broken. I want you to know that there's nothing wrong with you. I want you to know that you're doing something that makes sense to you on some level, otherwise you wouldn't keep doing it. And it's the judgment and the shame and the secrecy and all of the difficult feelings and emotions that we have that kind of keeps it alive. Because we judge it, our mind goes into sort of overwhelm and all the things, and then we'll do the habit again to have some settling down. So if you could just see that, even if you just see that one thing, that you're doing it from a good place, it means you can see, firstly, you don't have to. Secondly, you can do hard things. You can handle that emotion. You are doing it. One of the things that people used to say to me, which really fucking annoyed me at the time, is, oh, you're doing so well, and I don't know how you do it, and I don't know what I'd do if that was me. And whilst I used to get really, really annoyed about it, because I think, well, what else am I supposed to do? Like, how else, what choice do I have? I have to get through this. There's a sense, a sort of conditioned sense that it's really hard. It is hard, but it's almost like you're broken now. And I don't know how I'd, cope if that were me, because there's this sort of sense that there are things that are uncopable with. Now we are here and we get through everything that we've ever been through until we don't. And you have 100% success rate of getting through everything in your life because you have done up till now. Now, I'm not saying it's easy. It hasn't been easy for me. It is easier for me now because I've reached a place of deep love and respect for myself, which I have never had in my life before. And because I carried guilt, because I carried shame, because I thought it should have been me and not my brother, because all the things don't matter, because they are going to be unique for every single one of you. But if I can offer you any hope around this, the addiction or the habit doesn't define who you are. The grief doesn't define who you are. You are made up of a million different beautiful moments, and we are the ones that create the label around them being good or bad experiences. They're experiences that we've had, and the older I get, of course, the more people I meet who are going through grief or trauma. I just happened to go through it in my early 20s, where it wasn't so prominent, let's say, but they are what makes us all unique, and our own unique experience is what makes you human. And your humanness is what makes you sometimes fragile, sometimes vulnerable, sometimes angry, sometimes joyful, sometimes loving, sometimes lost, but mostly always whole. No, not mostly, always whole, never broken. And each moment is a different experience for you to experience as you go through your life. And the one thing that keeps you and it is your stability, is your grounding, is that part of you that's in here that's been there since you were a teeny tiny thing until now. Because what's true is love is that thing that's that always stays the same. What's not true is everything that's in the world of form, which is anything that's changeable, like our bodies, like anything in the world of form. Love is constant. My little dog's bark is not constant, but always happens when I do these. So, what would it look like for you not to be hard on yourself? Grief is exhausting. Grief is and can be lonely if you don't share how you're feeling. Grief can induce many, many, many different emotions, many different feelings, family fallouts, many things, but it doesn't have to mean that you're broken. I wouldn't wish what I went through on anybody, and I wouldn't wish what I've seen happen and heard happen to other people on anybody, but there's nothing we can do. These things have happened. And if you're, drinking or smoking or doing whatever you're doing, it doesn't matter. And it doesn't have to always be that way. And you don't have to punish yourself for doing the things, because at some point you won't. And that's just how we work. If it makes sense to us to do it, we'll do it. And if it doesn't make sense to us, we won't. Now, one of the problems comes when we can get addicted to things, or we can get into a kind of habitual state of consuming every day, and then we have judgment over it, and then we might try and stop, and then we kind of we might try and add on and find people to follow, plans to follow, and people then will say, I've fallen off the wagon, or whatever it is they say. And again, there is no wagon to fall off. A new day is a new day is a new day. What's in the past is now in the past, and you can start afresh. But if you know why your habit is being created, and again, I've done a video on this, it's the pinned video on my YouTube channel about the neuroscience of a habit. But the biggest thing I want you to take from this is you don't have to keep feeling guilty. You don't have to keep feeling shame. There are many people out there who are experiencing and going through grief and traumatic grief, and are coping in whatever way they see fit. And none of those ways is wrong. It just is a way. and it's okay. And if you can take the judgment out of it and take the shame out of it, you'll probably have less, you'll probably feel less inclined to keep doing what you're doing, because you'll be being kinder to yourself. And if you weren't being very kind to yourself before the grief, then that's potentially a place to look for fresh insight, or, you know, fresh thinking. And if I could go back and tell the younger me, you're okay and you don't need to do this stuff, and there's nothing wrong with you, then I would, but I can't. So I'm going to try and share the message as widely as I can to my audience. Whoever chooses to listen to this video, I might put it on my podcast. But I hope you found that helpful. I do have a program that you can access about finding freedom from habits and anxiety, and I'll put the link in the comments. If anyone's interested, you can always send me a message. It's a program you can just do at your own pace. It's an 8-week program, but it's a complex issue, and I think there is hope. There is hope, and it's not going to be like this forever. I promise you that. And I don't want to say any of the crappy platitudes that I used to hear, but you're doing incredibly well, whatever it is you're doing, however it is you're coping. There is no right or wrong, but just know that you're okay. Deep down, there's a part of you that's always got your back. There's a wiser part of you that always guides you whichever direction. And for those of you that have been guided to me, I'm always deeply grateful for that. So I hope you continue to have the rest of a lovely day wherever you are, and I'll see you next week. Ciao.